I want to think carefully about attention, which is the most valuable resource you have, and, not coincidentally, the least protected one. I do not mean this as a complaint about phones, and I do not mean it as the familiar lament about how technology is ruining our minds, because that lament, however emotionally satisfying, is too vague and too moralizing to be useful. I want to look at the structure. I want to understand what the modern environment is actually built to do to your attention, why it is built that way, and what the direct and largely invisible economic consequences of that construction are for the ordinary person moving through it. Because attention, when you follow it carefully, turns out to be the hinge on which a great deal of a person's economic life quietly turns. And the fact that it is being systematically captured and fragmented and sold has consequences that reach much further than most people who are inside the situation have registered. Let me begin by clearing away the two extreme readings, because this is a subject where people reach immediately for one or the other, and both are wrong. The first extreme is the conspiratorial one, the idea that there is a room somewhere full of people deliberately plotting to keep the population distracted and poor, that the whole thing is an intentional scheme with a controlling intelligence behind it. That is not what is happening. And believing it is happening actually prevents clear thinking, because it locates the problem in a villain who can be blamed rather than in a structure that must be understood. And the second extreme is the dismissive one, the idea that this is all overblown, that people have always complained about new distractions, that the printing press and the radio and the television all provoked the same anxieties, and that this is simply the latest instance of an old and harmless pattern. That reading is also wrong, because it treats a genuine difference of kind as though it were merely a difference of degree, and misses what is actually new about the present situation. What is actually happening is neither a conspiracy nor a harmless continuation. It is the natural and unintended result of a set of incentives operating at a scale and a level of sophistication that has never existed before. The most talented engineers of a generation, equipped with the most sophisticated tools ever built for understanding and shaping human behavior, working inside companies whose entire commercial existence depends on one thing, have been pointed at a single problem, which is how to capture and hold as much of your attention as possible for as long as possible, as often as possible. That is not a side effect of what these companies do. It is the core of what they do. Their revenue is a direct function of the quantity of attention they can extract from you and resell. And so every resource they have, every incremental improvement, every experiment run across billions of interactions is directed at the single goal of making the thing harder to put down. And when the most capable people alive, using the most powerful tools available, spend 2 decades optimizing relentlessly for a single goal, they get extraordinarily good at it. The result is an environment engineered with a precision that is genuinely difficult to overstate, to be more compelling than your own intentions. So let me establish why attention matters so much, because the whole argument depends on it, and it is a point that is easy to nod along to without actually absorbing. Attention is the fundamental resource out of which everything else you might build is constructed. Time is often described as the scarce resource, and it is scarce. But time by itself is not quite the thing. Time is the raw material. Attention is time made productive. An hour of distracted, fragmented, half-present time produces almost nothing and leaves almost nothing behind. An hour of full, undivided, deeply engaged attention can produce a great deal and can compound. Every genuinely valuable thing a person builds over the course of a life, every skill acquired to the point of mastery, every piece of specific knowledge developed to the edge of what is known, every product or business or body of work of any real worth is built out of attention applied to something consistently over a long enough period. Attention is the input. It is the thing that, directed and sustained, becomes competence, and competence directed and sustained becomes mastery, and mastery is the foundation of the leverage and the ownership that produce genuine wealth. Fragment the attention and you have cut the process off at its root before it can even begin. And this is the precise mechanism by which the modern environment, whatever anyone's intentions, functions to keep the ordinary person poor. It does so at the level of attention, upstream of money, entirely, before questions of income and saving and investing even arise. It captures and fragments the one resource out of which the escape from poverty would have to be built. Let me be careful and precise about how this works, because there are two distinct mechanisms operating, and both of them matter. The first mechanism is that the capture of your attention consumes exactly the resource that building requires. The acquisition of genuine specific knowledge, the development of a real skill to the point where it becomes valuable, the patient construction of any asset that might one day compound, all of these require sustained, undivided, often tedious attention applied over long periods through the flat early stretches where nothing visible is being produced. That kind of deep, continuous focus is precisely the thing the modern environment is engineered to interrupt. Every notification, every pull toward the feed, every small hit of novelty is a fracture in exactly the continuous attention that building demands. The person whose attention is fragmented 100 times a day is not merely losing those minutes. They're losing the capacity to enter the deep, sustained state in which real work happens at all, because that state requires a runway of uninterrupted focus to reach, and the environment is designed to deny that runway. You cannot build specific knowledge in 90-second increments between interruptions. The depth is not available at that resolution. The second mechanism is that the environment converts you at the level of your default behavior from a producer into a consumer. And this is worth dwelling on, because the distinction between producing and consuming is one of the most important distinctions in a person's economic life. And the modern environment tilts the balance overwhelmingly toward consumption and does so at the level of attention before it ever reaches the level of money. The feed is a consumption machine. Its entire function is to serve you an endless stream of things to consume, content to scroll through, videos to watch, opinions to react to, and every unit of that consumption is a unit of your attention transferred to someone else's benefit. You are not building anything while you consume. You are, quite precisely, the product being processed, your attention harvested and resold, and the value of every hour you spend inside the machine flows outward, away from you, to those who produce and monetize what you are consuming. There is an old distinction in economics between a consumption economy and a production economy, between a society organized around consuming what others have produced and a society organized around producing things of genuine value. And the same distinction operates at the level of the individual life, and it operates first and most consequentially at the level of attention. Every hour of your finite attention is spent either consuming, which transfers value away from you, or producing, which builds value that can accumulate and compound and eventually be owned. The ratio between those two, the fraction of your attention that goes to building versus the fraction that goes to consuming, is one of the most powerful determinants of the trajectory of your economic life. And the modern environment is engineered to push that ratio as far toward consumption as it possibly can, because your consumption is its revenue. It is, in the most literal sense, built to keep you consuming, which is to say, built to keep you on the side of the arrangement from which value flows outward, rather than the side on which value accumulates. These principles, the way attention becomes specific knowledge, and specific knowledge combined with leverage becomes ownership, and ownership is the only thing that finally produces durable wealth, are worth studying deliberately and as a connected whole rather than absorbing in scattered fragments. And there is a body of work that lays them out carefully called the Naval Codex, CTA-1. It is not a productivity system, and it is not a set of tactics for managing your screen time. It is a systematic account of the underlying principles that determine who builds genuine long-term wealth and who merely earns income and consumes it, of how leverage and specific knowledge and ownership actually interact. If you are serious about these questions, engaging with the principles directly is more valuable than any single tactic, because the principles hold regardless of which particular distraction the environment happens to be using against you this year, and the particular distractions will keep changing. I want to go deeper now into the requirement of depth, because it is the point on which the entire economic consequence turns, and it is worth making precise. The knowledge that produces wealth, the specific knowledge that leverage can multiply into enormous output, is by its nature deep knowledge. It is knowledge that sits at the edge of what is understood, that is acquired through sustained engagement rather than through casual exposure, that cannot be picked up in passing, because if it could be picked up in passing, it would already have been picked up by everyone and would therefore be worth nothing. Deep knowledge requires deep attention, and deep attention requires the ability to hold your focus on a single genuine problem without interruption for long stretches, and to return to it again and again over months and years. This is the capability that the modern environment is quietly destroying, not by any single dramatic act, but by the accumulated effect of a million small fractures, each one training your attention to expect interruption, to crave novelty, to flinch away from the sustained stillness in which deep work occurs. And here is the consequence, stated plainly. The person whose capacity for deep attention has been eroded is confined, whether they realize it or not, to the acquisition of shallow knowledge. And shallow knowledge is precisely the commoditizable kind, the kind that many people have, the kind that the market pays least for, and that any new technology can most easily replace. The environment that fragments your attention is therefore not merely wasting your time in a general sense. It is confining you to the least valuable tier of knowledge, the tier that produces the lowest economic return, by systematically depriving you of the depth of focus required to reach any higher tier. It keeps you shallow, and shallow is poor, because shallow is what everyone else also is. And value comes from what is rare, and depth is rare, precisely because the environment makes it so difficult to achieve. There is a further and subtler mechanism I want to examine, because it operates beneath conscious awareness, and it is, I think, the most powerful of all. And that is the substitution of cheap reward for real reward at the level of the motivational system itself. The building of anything of genuine value offers its reward slowly and at a delay. You work often for a long time before you see any result, and the reward, when it comes, is the deep and durable satisfaction of having built something real. The feed offers a reward that is the opposite in every respect. It is immediate, it is effortless, it requires nothing to be built, and it arrives in small, frequent, variable hits, novelty and stimulation, and the small social validations of the like and the reply and the number that goes up. This cheap reward is engineered specifically to trigger the same motivational machinery that real accomplishment triggers, but to trigger it without any accomplishment, to deliver the feeling of stimulation and even the feeling of a kind of progress without anything actually having been produced. And because the cheap reward is immediately available and the real reward is deferred and uncertain, the nervous system, which is calibrated to prefer the immediate over the deferred, reaches for the cheap reward again and again, and in reaching for it repeatedly, the capacity to pursue the deferred reward, to tolerate the long delay that real building requires, quietly atrophies. You are not merely being distracted. You are being trained at the level of your reward system to prefer the simulation of accomplishment to the reality of it, and to lose gradually the patience for the slow, delayed, compounding work through which real value is actually created. Now I want to widen the lens, because everything I have described so far operates at the level of the individual and their attention, and there is a larger structure within which this is occurring, and the two fit together in a way that is worth seeing clearly. While your attention is being captured and fragmented and resold, the monetary system within which you live is quietly working against you in a different way, and the two mechanisms reinforce each other with a kind of terrible efficiency. We live in a debt-based monetary system in which the supply of money expands over time, and this expansion flows first into assets, bidding up the prices of the things that owners own, while wages and cash savings lag and erode. The person who holds their wealth in wages and cash is being diluted continuously and silently, their purchasing power flowing away toward those who hold assets. And this happens slowly enough that in any given month it is barely perceptible. And yet over the span of a life, it is an enormous transfer. And here is where distraction and dilution meet. The person whose attention is captured is precisely the person who never steps back far enough to notice the dilution. They never take the sustained, undistracted time required to understand how the monetary system is working against them, to see that their diligent saving in a diluting currency is quietly losing ground, to question the arrangement they are inside, and to reposition themselves from the side that is diluted to the side that is carried along. Distraction is the thing that keeps you from ever noticing the mechanism that is keeping you poor. The captured attention and the diluted wage are not two separate problems. They are two halves of a single structure, in which the fragmentation of your attention ensures that you never develop the sustained focus required to understand and escape the monetary dilution. And the monetary dilution ensures that even the wages you earn while distracted are quietly losing their value. You are being drained from both directions at once, and the drain from one direction guarantees that you never notice the drain from the other. The way capital actually moves during these monetary shifts, where it flows and why, and what happens to different kinds of assets when the monetary order itself begins to change, is worth understanding in its specific mechanics rather than in vague outline, and it requires exactly the kind of sustained attention the environment is trying to deny you. There is a framework that traces precisely this, called the Dragon Pivot, CTA2. Despite the name, it is not really about any single country. It is about how monetary transitions unfold across history, what they do to different asset positions, and how those who understood them in advance position their wealth to survive the discontinuity rather than be diluted by it. If the structure I am describing concerns you, and for anyone holding their wealth mainly in wages and cash, it genuinely should, that is where the fuller picture lives, and understanding it is itself an act of reclaiming your attention from the machine and directing it at something that actually matters to your future. Because that, in the end, is the thing that must be reclaimed, and it is worth naming precisely what the genuine scarcity now is. We live in a world in which information has become effectively infinite and effectively free. Anything you might want to know is available to you instantly at no cost. In such a world, information is no longer the scarce resource, and access to information is no longer the edge it once was. What is scarce, what has become genuinely rare and therefore genuinely valuable, is the capacity to direct sustained, undivided attention at a single important thing for a long time. In a world drowning in infinite information and infinite distraction, the ability to focus is the rarest and most valuable capability a person can possess, precisely because the entire environment is engineered to destroy it. The person who has preserved or rebuilt their capacity for deep directed attention holds something that almost no one else holds. And that capability, applied to a genuine problem over a long enough period, is the root from which specific knowledge and leverage and ownership all grow. Attention, reclaimed and directed, is the master resource, and in the current environment it is also the rarest, which is exactly what makes it so valuable to the few who manage to keep it. And the question is what to direct that reclaimed attention toward, because reclaiming it is only half of the task. Attention reclaimed from the feed and then merely spent on some other form of consumption has gained you nothing. The reclaimed attention must be directed at building, at the patient construction of ownership, at the acquisition of the deep specific knowledge that leverage can multiply, at the creation of products and assets that generate genuine value and that can compound and be owned. And here, the same distinction I have been drawing at the level of attention reappears at the level of what you build, because not all assets are equal. There is a crucial difference between assets whose value is grounded in genuine productive capability, in the creation of real value for real people, and assets whose value is merely a financial claim on a strained system, or worse, a form of engineered speculation that resembles wealth in favorable conditions and reveals itself as something else when conditions turn. The reclaimed attention should be directed at the former, at building things of genuine and durable productive value, because those are the assets whose worth survives the monetary transitions and the technological disruptions that will inevitably come. The work of distinguishing genuinely productive assets from merely financially engineered ones, and of building a position out of real productive capability and real institutional protection rather than out of speculation or paper claims on a strained system, is worth doing systematically and with your full attention rather than reactively and in fragments. And there is a framework devoted precisely to that called the Sovereign Vault, CTA 3. It is concerned with building durable, generationally significant wealth, grounded in things that produce real value in the world, rather than in the financial engineering that looks like wealth in good conditions and dissolves in bad ones. For anyone who is serious about building something that lasts, rather than merely chasing the next stimulating opportunity the way one chases the next item in a feed that is the fuller treatment, and it demands exactly the sustained attention that reclaiming your focus makes possible. Now, I want to address the way all of this intersects with artificial intelligence, because the arrival of genuinely capable artificial intelligence sharpens every dynamic I have been describing, and sharpens it in both directions at once. On one side, artificial intelligence is about to flood the world with an even more overwhelming quantity of content, infinite and cheap and increasingly indistinguishable from the genuine, which will make the attention environment more overwhelming than it already is, the feeds more compelling, the machinery of distraction more powerful and more difficult to resist. The volume of things competing for your attention is about to increase by orders of magnitude, and the sophistication with which they are optimized to capture you is about to increase along with it. For the person whose attention is already captured, this is a deepening of the trap. But on the other side, and this is the point that matters most, artificial intelligence enormously amplifies the person who has preserved their capacity for deep, directed attention and who has used it to build genuine, specific knowledge. Because these tools multiply the output of a focused mind applied to a genuine problem, and they do very little for a fragmented mind that has no deep knowledge to amplify and no sustained focus to direct them with. The person who can concentrate, who has built real depth in a genuine domain, who can direct these powerful new tools with the precision that only deep understanding allows, becomes dramatically more productive, captures dramatically more value. And the person whose attention has been shattered into 1,000 fragments, who has only shallow knowledge and no capacity for sustained focus, is left competing directly against the very tools that make the focused person so powerful on exactly the commoditizable, shallow ground where those tools are strongest. The gap between the person who directs their attention and the person whose attention is captured, which was already widening, is about to widen much faster, because the same technology that deepens the trap for the distracted amplifies the advantage of the focused, and the distance between the two is about to become a chasm. So I want to turn, as I always eventually do, to the hardest question, which is why, given that all of this is true and none of it is secret, so few people reclaim their attention and direct it at building. And the answer, as it usually is, has nothing to do with the lack of information and everything to do with the genuine difficulty of the required behavior. The first reason is simply that you are fighting the most sophisticated persuasion systems ever built, systems designed by the most capable people alive specifically to defeat your intentions, and it is genuinely difficult in a straightforward and unembarrassing way for a single ordinary person to consistently defeat a machine that has been optimized across billions of interactions to be more compelling than that person's own will. This is not a moral failing. It is an asymmetry of power, and pretending it is a simple matter of discipline underestimates what is actually being resisted. The second reason is that the addiction is real at the level of the nervous system and the withdrawal is real. The reward machinery I described earlier, trained over years to prefer the cheap, immediate hit to the deferred, real reward, does not release its grip easily. The reclaiming of attention involves a genuine period of discomfort, of boredom that feels almost unbearable at first because the nervous system has been trained to expect constant stimulation, of the restless craving for the fragmenting hit that the environment has taught it to need. To sit with a single difficult problem in undistracted silence when your reward system is screaming for the feed is genuinely hard, and it is hard in a way that has a real physiological basis, not merely a failure of character. And the third reason is social proof. The same powerful force that operates on every human decision. Everyone around you is captured. The universal condition, the visible default of nearly every person you encounter is the fragmented attention, the phone in the hand, the constant partial presence. To reclaim your attention is to do something that almost no one around you is doing, to step outside the visible consensus of behavior. And human beings are profoundly reluctant to deviate from what everyone around them is doing, even when what everyone is doing is quietly destroying them. The very universality of the distraction makes it feel normal, and normal feels safe, and to do otherwise feels strange and effortful and lonely. And so most people, feeling the strangeness, drift back into the universal condition, and the machine keeps them. And so I want to end not with an exhortation to throw away your devices in some dramatic gesture of renunciation, because that is the shallow version of this and it rarely lasts, but with something quieter, which is an invitation to see the structure clearly and to understand what is genuinely at stake. This is, in the end, one of the oldest truths there is. The truth that what you consistently give your attention to is what you become, that focus is the root of all mastery, that the disciplined direction of attention over a long time is the source of every genuinely valuable thing a person builds. It is an old truth understood by every serious tradition of human development that has ever existed. What is new is only the circumstance and environment engineered at industrial scale with unprecedented sophistication to fragment that attention and capture it and resell it, and to do so precisely because your captured attention is enormously profitable to those who capture it. And your poverty, or at least your confinement to the consuming and diluted side of the economy, is the natural consequence, whether or not anyone intends it, of that capture. The modern world is not built by conspirators sitting in a room deciding to keep you distracted and poor. It is built by incentives, by companies doing exactly what their commercial nature drives them to do, which is to extract and resell as much of your attention as they possibly can. And the effect of that extraction, aggregated across your days and your years, is to deprive you of the one resource out of which any escape would have to be constructed. To see this clearly is the beginning of everything, because you cannot reclaim what you have not noticed is being taken. And then, having seen it, to begin quietly and imperfectly and against genuine resistance, to reclaim your attention and to direct it, not at some other form of consumption, but at the patient building of real specific knowledge and real ownership of things that produce genuine value. This is not done in a single act of dramatic renunciation. It is done slowly, in the accumulation of many small choices to close the feed and sit with the difficult real thing, to tolerate the boredom until the depth becomes available again, to give your sustained attention to something that will compound rather than something that will merely stimulate. It is done slowly, and it feels for a long time as though it is producing nothing, because depth and mastery and ownership all reveal themselves slowly. And then, at some point that cannot be predicted in advance, it is revealed suddenly when the depth you were building all along finally becomes the rare and valuable thing that almost no one else possesses, because almost no one else was willing to reclaim from a world built to take it the attention required to build it.